Welcome back, internet friends. 2020 was a difficult year, for most of us I'm sure. But did you know in 2019 there were some warning signs? We had Event 201, and if we had listened to the whispers of some of the elite globalists, we might have been able to see COVID-19 coming and be a little more prepared. Now going into 2021 feels like putting on a blindfold and picking out a random science fiction horror movie that you get to live in for a year. Now the future is impossible to predict, but today I want to talk with you about a few likely scenarios and crises that we may face and how you might survive them. And remember, this is not a financial advice video. You could do everything I say and still get completely wrecked. The first possible crisis that we are likely to face is one of an economic crisis. This year, it was crazy. We saw inflation in food at about 20 to 25%, depending what item you're looking at. Cheese that I would buy in February was about $9. Now we're looking at $14 for that same bar of cheese. Dairy, meat, animal products, as well as some fruits and vegetables have gone up by about 15 to 20%. But we may face a really bad economic crisis and high food inflation. Of course, the Fed says there is no inflation. They measure things with a CPI that makes absolutely no sense. According to the Federal Reserve, they are printing money and creating stimulus because they want more inflation, and they don't care about the inflation we're already experiencing because their way of measuring inflation is through their own CPI metrics. In 2020, there were $9 trillion worth of stimulus injections. It took America over 2 centuries for our money supply to get where it was. And 2020 alone, we had increased that by an estimated 23%. The money supply has increased tremendously. The Fed says there is no inflation, but we have seen record high stock markets, record high Bitcoin prices, record high housing prices, and we've also seen a big increase in food, but I believe all commodities will increase in price next year because of this huge increase in the currency supply that happened this year. We also are going to see much more government spending and deficit spending, meaning money we don't have. And the only way for any country to keep spending money it doesn't have is to create it out of thin air. And according to Joe Biden, he wants more stimulus, and he's projected to print even more money than we did this year. He's chosen Janet Yellen, former Federal Reserve Chairman, as his Secretary of Treasury. We're basically going to marry the Federal Reserve with the United States government and banking system. They've basically chosen the ultimate money printer as Secretary of Treasury. So unfortunately, our already indebted United States government is going to spend way more and create way more currency. And I think if the economy does pick back up, we're going to see money circulating faster, therefore prices will rise. The best thing that you can ever do to be prepared for hyperinflation is to hyperinflate that like button to blue. Now, what would be the solution to this planned demolition of the United States dollar and economy? First of all, I would say to diversify your investments. Get things like commodities, precious metals, gold, silver. You can also look into cryptocurrencies. I've personally taken a big position a few months ago in Litecoin and Bitcoin. It also would be important to stock up on the things that you can buy cheaply now that you have to have, like food and certain emergency supplies. Stuff that you can buy now and store will be valuable in the future. My cousin, who lives in Argentina, which Argentina has seen terrible inflation. Right now, it's like 180 to 1, 180 peso to $1. When I was there 6 years ago, it was 14 to 1. And one way my cousin has been able to get along with this is, one, people in Argentina who are smart buy gold, and they buy whatever they can. Coca-Cola and water bottles are a smart commodity that they buy because the money goes down in value so fast, but people always need water, and Coca-Cola is very popular in Argentina, so all the restaurants are selling it. So my cousin trades Argentine fiat for gold or Coca-Cola. But being diversified and not just saving a huge chunk of cash in the bank, I would say that's an incredibly risky thing to do. You might be wiser to spread that money out into various investments. Like I said before, Bitcoin and gold usually trade inversely with the dollar. You don't have to do what I'm doing, but I'm hoarding some Bitcoin and some precious metals. I also think land would be a great investment if you can find cheap land somewhere. The second crisis it looks like we are probably going to face, and this one's a little scarier, is a food shortage. There's already been shortages in certain items. If you look at the Chick-fil-A app, it says you can't have certain salads because their supply chain has been hit. We're seeing food shortages around the world and in certain items. In America, we had the derecho storm, which just wrecked the middle America farmland. Farmers in Iowa, a major agricultural state and top corn producer in the US, found their corn crops had been flattened and agricultural infrastructure such as silos, grain bins had been imploded by the storm. Crop damage was even visible in satellite imagery. The USDA Risk Management Agency reported that 57 of Iowa's 99 counties with 14 million acres of crops had been in derecho's path. This is almost 66% of the 21 million acres of corn and soybeans planted in the year 2020. Damage was particularly bad in 36 of those 57 counties, accounting for a total of 3.57 million acres of corn and 2.5 million acres of soybeans, which combined for 20% of Iowa's cropland. Surprisingly, we've seen many food storage and food processing places around the planet go up in flames or have some disaster. Something strange is happening, but the food supply is under attack at this time. A large amount of livestock and chickens were slaughtered because they couldn't be processed during the year. COVID-19 made it so that meat workers and people who would process this food were not allowed to come to work. Everyone at the food packing places had to do mandatory COVID testing, and if one test was positive or false positive, then everyone had to stay home for a certain amount of time, and basically that food did not get processed. A lot of day laborers and people who would go pick the fruit and vegetables right off the vine, they weren't called into work or they were asked to stay home. So a lot of the onions and crops died on the vine this year. Millions and millions of crops just wasted. We grew them just so they could rot on the vine. And the same thing happened with chickens. Millions and millions and millions of chickens were killed this year, euthanized, or they died in some kind of chicken coop fires. This is going to shorten the supply of eggs. What would a solution be to a food crisis? Buy some food ahead of time. It's not a bad idea just to have a couple big bags of rice, beans, and I have all the canned fruit that I like to have as sides. I've got corn, I've got lots of vegetables and fruit, just canned food I like to eat. I do not recommend you buy those survival packages that they sell you for $500. These overpriced food prep companies basically are taking advantage of people. So they try to sell you this bucket of like a variety pack and it's supposed to be all good. How do you make food last for 15 years in those buckets? You fill it with salt and preservatives and chemicals. It's horrible to eat. I pray to God I never have to eat it. And it's actually very, very bad for me. It's full of maltodextrin and preservatives and tons of sodium. That's how they make this food last for like 15 years. Another solution, start your own little garden. My family has made a little garden. We've all started growing vegetables, fruits. In my area of California, almost anything grows easily. I know my mom is growing carrots and lemons and avocados and various vegetables, tomatoes, peppers. Starting your own garden will help you mitigate the rising costs of fruits and vegetables. And if something does happen to the food supply, you have a guarantee that you're gonna have a salad in the springtime. Things like citrus trees, if you're in Florida or California, citrus trees grow abundantly very easily. So my neighborhoods around here are littered with orange trees and lemon trees and grapefruits. Look into food that grows around you locally and things that you might be able to eat in an emergency. Now, I'm no doctor, I'm no nutritionist, but another thing I would recommend you try that has really benefited me personally is a fast. Try fasting for even a few hours in the day, and if you can, do some research. You can use an app that will actually help you fast. try to fast with just water and salt, or water and tea, for 1 to 3 days perhaps. This is an excellent survival skill to have. I personally fast every month for about 48 to 50 something hours. I go a little more than 2 days with nothing but salt and water. And I know that if I was in a survival situation, if I was stranded, I know that I have been 2 days without food. Have you ever gone 2 days without food? I would be able to feel confident, even in hunger, that I'm gonna be okay and that the feeling isn't new. If someday we have a food shortage and you have never gone without food for 2 to 3 days, you may get ultimately panicked. It may be terrifying your first time starving yourself. I know the first time I fasted was pretty scary. Occasionally I was afraid that I would faint or get sick from low blood sugar. Luckily I didn't, because I was being healthy with my fast. But it's a good skill to have, and it's very good for your body. It helps reset the insulin resistance in your body if you're pre-diabetic. It gives you all sorts of benefits. There's autophagy, things. I could make an entire video about fasting. I may do that in the future. What is the last scenario that we may face, and probably the worst? This is the one that it's almost impossible to prepare for. It's a cyber attack. The World Economic Forum keeps ranting on about cyber attacks being the big problem of 2021. Recently, the United States of America just had the largest cyber attack in our history. The World Economic Forum keeps ranting about cyber attacks. In 2013, a short film about a scenario that might take place if a cyber attack led to a grid down situation. In my home of California, power is actually fluctuating quite often. They'll turn off the power in your neighborhood if they're afraid of fire season. Or if there's too many people running electricity, they have begun rationing electricity to Californians. I know some countries like South Africa, they struggle to meet the power needs of their people. Their power plants don't produce enough to handle mining operations, which have to get shut down, as well as different cities. People go with only power for 2 or 3 hours a day in parts of South Africa. What would help you survive during potentially a grid down scenario? Like I said, this is going to be the hardest situation to prepare for. Number 1, try to avoid elevators. When you can, take the stairs. It'll be better for you, and you prevent the chance of you getting stuck in an elevator. If we ever had a power outage and you were in an elevator, you're basically going to die. Hopefully people can find you, but if we had a power outage for multiple days or weeks and you were trapped in an elevator, there's a very good chance you will die. I don't like to be in elevators as much as I can. I prefer a lot of stairs. There's a great warrior quote that I like to think of: sweat more in peace and bleed less in war. That's something we can do to prepare. Practice in your home once in a while, just living with candles for light. A few hours, maybe just use candles and try to adapt your eyes. Try to find different ways to create heat and food sources. For example, you can take an old tuna can that's empty, put some cardboard in it with any fuel like kerosene or bacon grease, even candle wax, and you make this nice little candle that is like a personal flame. That would make heat, or you could put a pot over it and even cook on top of it. I personally always have 3 7-gallon water containers full. That gives me like 21 gallons of drinking water. So if there was a power outage and no more water came from the taps, I would be able to survive at least a couple weeks with my water jugs. Always have good, clean drinking water stored just in case of an emergency. You can survive a few days without food. You can't survive very long without water. Keep essentials for surviving a power outage. Things like batteries, camping lights, a battery charger for your phone. Make sure your home has some kind of security that isn't all digital based. We're starting to get all these digital locks and digital iHome cameras and stuff. I like to have a metal security gate or some kind of gate to help protect me. In case the power did go down and people started to get crazy, you have some way to protect yourself and your food that isn't based on electricity. I also have GoPeds, these little scooters that can go 25 miles an hour, and they get incredible gas mileage. If there was a situation where gas no longer comes out of the pumps, I could ride around my scooters if I had to do errands or missions. It is clear that we face some of the most difficult times ahead. Aside from natural disasters like earthquakes and fires here in California, it is a possibility that we face a Great Depression, possible starvation, possible war, and power outages, cyber attacks. You could pick any random scary movie off of the DVD shelf, and we might live in that movie next year. So I hope you found these preparations a little bit helpful or informative. If you did, please go ahead and smash the like button. Feel free to leave a comment, let me know what you think, share this video, and help others get prepared for the worst case scenario. Work hard today and count your blessings. Let's hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Good luck to you out there. I'll see you next time, and just have a great day.